What is the biggest difference between the look of this new show when compared to the style of the Clone Wars?
Well, Clone Wars was a very angular in nature show, especially in the human characters. It's something that George and I pushed in the very beginning, and George was very interested in this kind of angularity. I played a lot of strong, straight against curve angles, and that yielded for some people a very hard look in the beginning, a very kind of wood cut look. I think for me the character design is somewhat more traditional in this show. I don't know if it's a little more anime than what Clone Wars looked like. I think sometimes the Clone Wars characters start to get softer in their features, so it's a little reminiscent of that. But overall, I think that's one of the main things is that the characters are a bit more traditional in their design sense, as far as I'm concerned. And then we've tried to allow for certain line work, pencil lines to be drawn on sets and things to allow for that real look that Ralph McQuarrie painted with to appear on the sets themselves, where in Clone Wars had a dramatic number of different texture styles and paintbrush variations, and we've tried to kind of consolidate just what Ralph painted with, what his technique was, so we can try to replicate that as best we can in our show. So those are kind of the major differences. I think the Clone Wars overall is somewhat darker a show. In that way, I mean that I think you would say Revenge of the Sith is a darker movie than A New Hope. And I think that we're definitely trying for more of a New Hope vibe with what we're doing on Rebels. And I think that both Greg and Simon are doing a great job with that. I think that that's one of the really fun things they bring to the table. It's just great character development, great banter. I learned all about visual filmmaking from George Lucas and many things about how to write Star Wars, but Greg has such a knowledge of animation writing and structure for his technique, and I've really been fascinated to kind of sit in the room with Greg and watch him work and develop stories and to interact with him that way. And so, and Simon is always great at pinpointing certain moments and really grabbing into a lot of emotion for moments. So again, just to go back to those two guys, because they're so important in this process, that's another thing that I think is different from Clone Wars, is having those guys and really, targeting in on the characters and saying we want this kind of banter and fun in the show. Not that we didn't go after that necessarily in Clone Wars, but I think it's pretty obvious in Clone Wars we dealt with some pretty intense subject matter, some very dark things, which is fine, but, we're in a different situation now where we're running from the Empire for the most part, which is the Star Wars that we grew up with in the classic trilogy. We're not, the generation that grew up with the Jedi who are being misled and led down a path of destruction. And ruin. Right. So it's a different tonal thing, and I think that will be clear when people start to watch the show.